Hello and welcome back to another video. Yes, we are here again, 2 weeks in a row. We'll see if that continues. And we're going to be looking back at what happened in the EMEA and also taking a look forward as what we've coming up in week 2. So I'll just get right into things. Obviously, I want to take a look through the matches individually. I think there were a couple of games that maybe were a little bit of a surprise, but I think for the most part, things kind of went as expected. I'll show you where my Pickhams ended up going. But first game of the week, I think I had two where I was like fairly confident in the way they were going to go. And I think Vitality, obviously facing off against GX, was another one that sort of fit that boat. I was maybe a little bit worried about Sivo coming in for this team because obviously I only really played within that tier 2, played for mandatory. And the guy was genuinely insane. Like, I think I actually ended up on the Valley Sports Instagram saying this might be one of the greatest debuts we've ever seen. And I stand by that point. Like, truly absurd how he was able to play. Like, genuinely, you look at, like, even just their ACS stats. This guy eclipsed the likes of Durka, Les, and Safe. And honestly, this was throughout the majority of the maps. I think we even go over, he was winning some of the opening duels, 23-8 on that Lotus. Like, genuinely looked like the best player in the server. So I don't know who's done the scouting because, yeah, sure, I think Sivo looked decent when he played in EMEA Challengers. But he definitely didn't look to the standard of a guy who was going to come in and just absolutely pound his opponents. I'll also say, on a side note for GX, I don't know if the Tombizz controller is the right choice. Now, I'm just going to go, like, even just go into his agent pool overall. Like, you look at some of the stats on controller, and it does seem like a sort of severe drop to everything else. Like, obviously, a lot of the Duelist was played in tier 2, but even going back to just, like, Sentinel, I think was more consistent. Like, the 265 on a Killjoy is pretty good. Played a lot of Cypher last season, up there in that 200 marker. And then other than the couple of games on Brimstone, his Omen is by far, like, the worst. So, in fact, is it the worst of any agent he's played? It looks like it. So, I think that this is just a bit of a miss in terms of roles because I'm not going to sit here and say he's a bad player. I'm a big fan of Tombizz. I think his Duelist, when he played for Saw, was fantastic. His Sentinel, when he was playing on KC, looked great. And then they put him on the controller, and it just looks completely out of place. Like, be it like some of the spots he's being caught in, I guess. Like, there were a few moments in the game where he just got absolutely trounced by bad luck and because he was up against great players. But it definitely didn't seem right for him. And at 9 and 31, like, okay, you could talk about stats all you want, but in this case, the stats didn't lie. When you're getting 5 and 4 kills in 2 maps, like, you're not going to win those maps. And the fact is, in the second half of this map, they actually looked decent on Split. I would say especially, I remember casting this game, the first half was the only rounds they had came from West Side. In fact, we might even be able to prove that just by going off the multi-frags that came in. You got 5, you got round 6 and round 10 at least. Just came into solely him alone with a 3K. I think there was another round where he got a 3K that they lost. So it really does just seem like one of those games where they really weren't in the matchup at all. And I think most people expected that, but I was still a little bit disappointed with what we saw. And also the fact that at least on the map that they came a little bit close on, They made some adaptations, like bringing in the Tejo, which I think obviously with extra time, that was kind of expected, but we saw how many scrims they played. It didn't seem to matter when they came up against the big boys. So definitely still some work to do there. On the other side of things, this was one of my wrong predictions. I wasn't sure if, firstly, again, having to make another change, bringing in Magnum, whether Levin could still like catch people as off guard as he did, but the kid's great. Like, it genuinely seems like the Turkish stocks are never going anywhere. Obviously, I think people are very critical of the comp when it came to Icebox. Sure, they got battered. Like, I think this was where you saw like Elite and Aves both having great games, which I think if we look at the rest of the series was quite a different story. But people are very critical of the Clove, but I think in my mind, I see what the concept was. Like, we've seen a lot of teams, like, obviously you're going to run that Viper, you're going to run a secondary controller sometimes, like we saw some teams do it with the Brim or with an Omen, and Clove almost gives you that solo Reina aspect where you can take more fights and potentially heal yourself back up. You have the potential to res yourself in integral situations. I think Prophet just had a really rough game, and then when you don't have anything else to fall back on with the utility, you get pounded. But that's the thing that's been impressive with this team. They've had so many trials and tribulations. Their Pearl, especially on defense, has always looked stellar with like a lot of the aggression that you'll see from the likes of Sociable. And Magnum as a debut looked very good. Like, I think on the maps they won, he was a standout player. So definitely glad to see him back in the league. I've spoken recently to Pow, and he's very impressed with what's come out of Magnum in such a short space of time. So I think real good opportunities for them going forward. On the other side of things, just still a bit underwhelming. Like, I think expectations have been high on this roster. And one of my, other than, again, in this map 1, it seemed like, well, that's the thing. You go 20-2 in map 1, and then you end up 43-38. You know that there's been a couple of rougher maps, and especially on Fracture, I think Elite really struggled. And I can't think of going back to when he was on BBL and coming in Turkish. I don't remember these results. I remember Elite was always consistent and always solid. So maybe some work to do specifically on those maps, but it's hard to pinpoint, but there definitely seems to just be something still missing for a roster that, again, expectations are that this is their sort of showstopper roster. This is them investing quite a bit of cash, like having the likes of Sadak in there, as said, buying out, I assume, or maybe Elite's contract run out. I don't really know the story there. But yeah, they've taken some risks. They've made some big signings, and as far as not looking that great. Obviously, I do now, like the more I see BBL, the expectations continue to increase, but we'll have to wait and see. I think I'm in a similar boat with how I feel about Heretics. Like, Heretics got the job done. That's the main thing. I think on Ascent, they kind of got it wrong in terms of the comp. I'll be honest, from stuff I've seen from Waylay, nothing has really changed my mind about the Edge. I think some of the early setups with the slow that they used were quite cool, but I think what ended up happening was, especially Fluorescent, started just playing in front of all of that utility. So you're going to go running in because, oh yeah, I've got basically a free Phoenix ult, except for the fact that when you die, you actually die. So then you run into the Fluorescent AWP, and yeah, Minibu start getting owned. And I think in the early rounds, these were probably a lot of first kills, and in the late rounds, it was a lot of first deaths. So struggling a little bit. I also want to give a huge shout out to Molzy. I think Molzy on this map, like if you were to look at the stats, you're not going to get the true picture. A lot of the time you're watching players getting caught in the nets or just being isolated by the wall from Deadlock. I think his utility was honestly superb, and well, there's no need to talk about the performance of Avova. Avova had two of the best maps I think we've ever seen him have, at least in the last few years. Like, if he's going to stay to that level, this actually makes this team exciting. The good things, though, Minibu is back. Minibu is definitely back, and I think Woot was in the last couple of maps. He definitely struggled in map number 1. Like, that's not a characteristic Woot performance, but back on the ISO, looked great. Again, on the Teo, looked great. So the fact that these two players are both performing is a good sign. My only worry is it's versus Apex, and obviously Apex are making changes. They're trying to bring in players with more experience to go alongside some of the youngsters that look quite good, but I think they still sit down the bottom. Like, I'd still put them as like maybe a 10th or 11th. So the fact that Heretics lost a map and at times seemed like they struggled a little bit doesn't fill me with the confidence of a team that last year was getting to a Champions final. So we'll have to see. Maybe that'll develop as the season goes on. Early days. Now, again, on paper, this result, I don't think anybody was shocked by, a 2-0 for FUT, but it's this map. Basically a giga choke from Koi, because they looked very, very good. And I think again, if you go to that first half, you had Filu was absolutely thriving. The second half, we move on. But yeah, I want to try and take a bit of good with Koi, because again, they're another team that I think, looking at expectations, you're going to put them near the bottom. The fact that they do have this in them, the fact that Filu can play against some of the best players in the world and still look pretty good, like, there's no doubt that it's always going to be difficult when you play against FUT, because even on an individual level, they're going to be tough to play against. So I like the fact that we saw that from him. The problem, though, and I'm just going to do the series stats, Zeus might be the best duelist in the league right now, which obviously it's only week 1. Durka had a quieter week. Maybe this doesn't last, but holy shit was this guy insane. Also, by the way, Mr. Farling going 9-0 in opening duels, which for your like guy a lot of the time who's playing these supportive positions, like he went on to something slightly more aggro, still had the setup there. I still think he's one of the best Teos we've seen, especially when it comes to Pearl and how he sets up a lot of this aggression. That's where he got most of his opening duels. But that's crazy. Like, to have your IGL fragging on that sort of level is super, super impressive. But this defensive half from Zeus is just fucking insane. 7-2 in opening duels, 455 ACS. Like, you just can't. And he's almost getting 2 kills a round. Like, that's not matched by anybody. So, yeah, clearly one of the best signings we've seen this year. And also, maybe one of the most obvious ones. I think there were a lot. I think Fnatic was linked to him. So, yeah, crazy stuff. Little bit worried on the other side that Krax had a kind of shitter of a series. Like, he was someone that, if you look to the peak of this team, was a very, very reliable player. Like, we've always talked about his KO, but even going just more in depth, like these being there over the last few months, and then you go all time, and it's much higher stats. Like, he just isn't there at the moment. And I think versus a Koi, you can get away with that. I think, like, maybe versus a mate, or you go forward, and versus, like, a TL, or even versus a BBL right at the end. I don't know if you get away with that. So, it jitters, but that's absolutely fine. Fnatic versus Na'Vi. This one, like, genuinely gobsmacked me. Because I come into, after kickoff, obviously Crashies, it's his first tournament in EMEA. So, you kind of, most people you'd think would give a little bit of wiggle room, and I think especially at the very end, I want to check that I'm not just making this up, but I remember in their last match or so of kickoff, he played pretty well. It was decent. Was it the fracture? Yeah, it was the fracture. I just remember him having a very good, like, last map that they ended up playing, and yeah, he won them the game. He won them the entire game. Like, and I mean, it wasn't particularly close. Like, he is eclipsed Chronicle, Kayak, Alpha, yeah, like, completely eclipsed them. And if you told me that was going to happen going into week 1, I would have called you. I probably would have booked you in for into an institute. Like, I don't think anybody saw that coming. I've heard from, like, people around Fnatic is like, no, Crash has actually been playing really well, and like all this stuff. But you kind of go like, oh yeah, scrims. But if somehow Fnatic have managed to swindle like a prime Crashies, this completely changes my outlook on the team. Like, maybe they could go all the way. Obviously, you kind of look down and you go, okay, I'd need to see some better performances from Althea and Kayak for that to happen. And I kind of can't judge teams too much playing against Na'Vi anymore. Like, you go back a couple of years, or you go back to FPX days, and beating a Na'Vi, even if they did some dumb shit, it was still really difficult. But, like, massive choke towards the end of the final map. A lot of their players just seem missing. Angel is just individually, like, not there. And I'm always going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, I think that there is a lot of aspects to micromanage within this team. Be it from language barriers, culture barriers. Like, it's not the same 5 players like last year where you can't give him that excuse. This year I can give it, but when you see them choke leads like this again and again, you kind of then the buck does stop with him and the coaching staff. You have to go, like, because like that, I think the exact same thing happened. It's literally the exact same as kickoff. Back-to-back games. Just a massive choke. Like, you're 8-4 up, you win the pistol, you get the next 2 rounds. It's like, okay, so you're massively in the lead. Is that by any chance the exact same here? Yes. And I think that then you do have to start looking at the leadership and other people. The silver lining, Koala looks like a pretty good signing. Like, getting them a lot of opening duels, individually, solid. Xiao, not quite the Xiao of old. Like, he's not winning you crazy clutches. And I'll also say that I have faith that a player like Hero is not gonna. Like, I don't think. Sorry, it was this map. I don't think this will happen too often. I think still a very young talent, so I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. But they could have made this series a lot more competitive if not for, yeah, a couple of individual players not performing to their standard and just, like, I don't know what goes on in these sort of moments. It seems to happen every single time with Na'Vi over the last, like, I was going to say 6 months, but it genuinely might be a lot longer than that. So we'll have to see. Maybe a turnaround. Obviously, Fnatic's always going to be a tough opponent. And, yeah, if Crashies can keep this up, crazy. Like, what a game from him. And then, yeah, final game of the week. The grudge match. I was so excited to get to cast this game because I was like, there's always going to be raw emotions when a player, after you make a Masters, you kick a player who individually played great. Like, I mentioned it going into some of their Haven matches. Like, this guy was one of the reasons, like, going back to EMEA, one of the reasons they played so well on that map. I think he was great within the role. And then on this team, he actually got swapped over and he was playing more supportive stuff. Like, I think it was the first couple of maps we just saw him playing Breach, and I was like, okay, he's going to play supportive element. Still had high impact individually. And yeah, Mini picking up an IGL. I was very worried about his own individual performance. The best player in the server. I don't even really think it was that arguable. Like, he played fantastic. Zipan being in more aggressive roles as well looked good because, again, going back to kickoff, he was that Breach KO guy. So the fact that they freed up Zipan to be more aggressive actually seemed to work really well. For Liquid, it's a much tougher look because you've brought in Serial, someone who a lot of the time was playing Sentinel. Going to overall roles, I mentioned it last week, he does play KO, he does play Sky. Like, it's not like it's a complete miss in terms of roles, but I think it was clear he was not comfortable. Like, there were moments where, like, first you put him on this Teo, which, I'll be honest, I thought would go to maybe a Patatek, which it did, and that also didn't go well, so... And then when you put him back on a Killjoy, sure, it's not a great performance. The team got smashed, but at least there were elements where you went, okay, this guy at least seems to be a little bit more in spots. But there was just times where it was like he was being set up to be aggressive, especially on Haven, and it just felt like a complete miss. And then when you look at how close the game was, I think that could have been a very different story. And some of the, like, I remember he got 2 kills off the ult and stuff like that, where it's almost just a setup, and then that's not so much him individually. His first game in the league, jitters can happen, pressure can get to you. But it is looking like a pretty big downgrade right now. And sure, I understand that the reasoning that this happened was because it didn't mesh. Like, things didn't work. And you could even see from the post-match interview that they had with Kamek that there's clearly something else there. So I don't want to, like, go too much into stuff that I don't really know too much about. Other worry sign... I would guess on the other side of things is Click still not having those performances. Like, I think that there were fairly high expectations on his shoulders, and like for this match, you go 0-8 in opening duels playing arrays, don't have a great performance. Like, sure, it's going to be difficult, like taking space, but it definitely seemed like he just didn't perform. Then he swaps to a Neon, same again, and okay, it was definitely better on the Waylay, but they also just kind of rolled them with a lot of their attack side rounds, and he was still lowest rated. But I always think that this stuff's kind of harsh when his ACS is good, he's getting decent kills, he's taking opening battles. Like, I kind of ignore the rating system when it gets to that level, but yeah, I want to see him have those bigger performances, because I think if you get him fragging alongside the rest of them, we could be in for a treat with Gentlemates. So now, we'll look at my Pickhams. So I think that obviously there was a couple. This one, I think I even said it in the video. I think this is an incredibly close game. It ended up being an incredibly close game, and I think the KC could have easily taken it, if not for, like, maybe a few quieter performances. And also BBL just playing a very good game. Also, this one surprised me, because I didn't think that one player could make such a sort of drastic difference. I guess with an overtime loss in map number 2, there is a world where Liquid come out on top. So it wasn't a blowout, but when you're a Masters team, like, I expect you to be competing with Fnatic, Vitality, Heretics. If you're struggling to beat Gentlemates, okay, maybe Gentlemates were leveled up, or maybe you've leveled down. And I'll be honest, part of me thinks it's the latter. Maybe they'll warm up like they did last time, but obviously in kickoff you have that loss and then you just go on a run. Like there's no second chances. I feel like the pressure's not really on them just yet, and I wonder if that was an element of it. And that actually brings me to my first pick'em, where I'm gonna go BBL, and maybe this will be finally what undoes the curse, because I think I've basically been betting against them the whole way. But I think adding in Magnum's been fantastic. I think Yumpy, as I'm not gonna say he's the best IGL in the league or anything like super over the top or high. It's extra hyperbole, but I think for someone who is a first-time IGL, like just starting a kickoff, I think he's been immense. I think his support that he gives to the team, like especially when you put him on a breach or something like that, I think he's fantastic. And I think with the sort of shakiness of this Liquid roster, I think they could find holes in it. And yeah, with Magnum playing well, Levin playing well, if Sociable is even given the tiniest bit of space to be explosive, yeah, I think that they could really do some damage. And I haven't mentioned Profect, but he's probably the best player on the team. But like, I think he had an underwhelming week because of the Clove not working out and not having the backup. But hey, you change that up and it's a very different story. Now this match, this one's actually really difficult, because there's a part of me that doesn't want to overreact to Na'Vi losing to Fnatic, but I've been really unimpressed with this team. Like really unimpressed. I think that, again, just the chokiness, and it seems like maybe struggling with pressure. So I'm going to go Apex. I genuinely think Apex looked better in their match versus Heretics. I think that Heretics are always a difficult team with talent from top to bottom, and I don't think that they played particularly bad. I think on Ascent, this team was fantastic. Now, I do believe that Na'Vi banned Ascent, which also, just to add, in Na'Vi's history, or in FPX history especially, Ascent has been one of their most played maps and one of their best maps. Like, literally, go through the maps. There's 43. I don't think there's any other map that's even remotely close. So, obviously, some of this will be the old Na'Vi team and stuff like that. But, again, like, this was always a map that, like, when they were in form, had some real strength to it. When they were out of form, I don't think it mattered what map they played. But it definitely feels peculiar to me that you have a really solid op player, and then, I want to check that I'm definitely correct, but I'm pretty certain, yeah, memory serves me well, they were banning Ascent. So maybe they'll ban Ascent again, but I just liked the setups and what we saw from Apex going into the week, and yeah, I think they're going to take that one. I still believe in FUT. I think they had I don't particularly like the comp they run on Lotus. I think that it's a bit too old meta for me, but I think there's a real chance for like a Giga duelist diff. And then everywhere across the park, I think that even though Mini's been great, I think Yetage, I still have a huge amount of faith in him. I think that Mr. Fallen is like the IGL support. I think he's fantastic. So I'm going to go FUT that way. Heretics Giant X, I think, could be closer than expected, but I still think they're going to have the problem of Tombizz just not looking the best on the controller role. And when you're up against someone as smart as Boo, there's a good chance that they pressure down on that. For KC versus Koi, I actually think this could be... Oh, do I take the gamble here? I am confident that Koi will win a match that we don't expect. And because I think that although Koi, I don't want to say they're rated unfairly, because I do think they are lower down in the league. I think they win this game. You got to take risks in your pick'ems. This is my risk, because I think that this game is a lot closer than people think it is. I do wonder if maybe off the back of some sort of like getting a kick up the arse, we might see a better KC going into this week. But yeah, KC have only really beaten Na'Vi, which doesn't fill me with confidence. Close versus Vitality, good game. Losing to GX, losing to BBL. That's my risk that's my risk. That's my risk to this week. Maybe you could also call this a risk, but I'm sorry, Na'Vi fans. I would love to see Angel Shao. I'd love to see Hero do well, but like, I just don't have faith at this stage. I don't think that they have like a master hold on the meta. I don't think individually everybody's looked good, and I think that there's definitely like frustration. I think there were clips of Angel getting quite frustrated. And then this game, which if you'd asked me at the beginning, if this had been week 1, I probably would have gone Fnatic just because of the changes. But Sivo looked insane. So I'm going to back Sivo to have another good week. I think the team looked confident. I don't think Durka had a crazy matchup. I think versus Fnatic he will, because he is the sort of person that will not want to lose to his old team. He won't want to look across the stage at Boaster and see him smiling and dancing and twerking. So I think he's going to look to shut that down. I think Safe also wants to prove that he is, well, the team is better than Fnatic. Maybe not him. I don't think he cares that much about him individually, but he wants to beat Fnatic, I think, to prove this Vitality roster once again. So, yeah, these are my Pickhams for a week. I'm being a bit more risky because I think this week I played these games safe, and I think I could have taken a gamble on a couple of them, and I kind of wish I had. So I'm gonna risk these 2 matches going a way that maybe most wouldn't have expected them to. I definitely I think if I'm going, I would probably put this maybe like 60-40 to KC, but I'm going to take the gamble because I just feel like Koi are maybe a little bit better than we expect, and because they played against FUT, they're being undersold. So we'll see how it goes. Again, you can tell me what you think of my Pickhams in the comments below. You can tell me that you think I'm a fool. That's absolutely fine, and what you would do instead. Either way, make sure to like, comment, share, whatever it is you want to do, and I'll see you hopefully next week for another video.